Prizm commands a serious premium, but does that premium make sense? I polled all of you to see which product is your favorite, and the results might shock you. Let's data dive. Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of Data Dive powered by Market Movers. My name is Tyler Nethercott, better known as Teapot, and last week I presented data around Luka Doncic's prices, and I asked you whether you think the serious premium for Luka over the other MVP caliber players makes any sense. The comments were a mixed bag. Overall, there did seem to be some confusion with some people thinking that I was bashing on Luka or that I don't understand the rationale for the premium right now, and that's not the case. What I was trying to show is that if Luka doesn't become one of the two best players of this era, there's no way his current prices can hold up. We can see in every generation 1 to 2, maybe 3 players who shine above the rest, and those prices command multiples over the other stars of those eras. And we think about those key players, you're talking about Bill Russell, Wilt Chamberlain, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, Larry Bird, Magic Johnson, MJ, Kobe, LeBron, and Steph. Those are the guys when it comes to card prices, and the rest can be had for a fraction of the cost. So this week, I want to talk about Prizm, specifically Prizm versus Optic and Select. And we'll cover the results of an IG poll that I ran, some gem rate data and population count data, as well as some price ratios, and then some direct card comparisons. So stick around, you're not going to want to miss the end of this. I put a lot of work into this, and you're going to want to see all of it. As always, this video is brought to you by Market Movers with hundreds of thousands of sales data points for Prizm, Optic, and Select. Visit marketmoversapp.com to use promo code DIVE for your first 7 days free. Now let's get into the data. All right, so first up, here's the poll that I ran on Instagram, and I don't have the most popular, hundreds of thousands of accounts following me on Instagram, but I did get quite a few responses to these polls. I always love running Instagram polls just to get other people's opinions and also to kind of pick out little data points to see how it might inform my card purchases. And I ran 3 polls, ignoring the prices, others' opinions, etc. Which product do you, I asked everybody, like better, Prizm or Optic? 69% said Optic. Now this is a loaded question. This is the product overall. I didn't say, which parallel do you like better, silver or hollow? I didn't say which base set, I just said which product. I didn't say a specific year. That also can kind of come into play for some people. I know it does for me. But overall, 69% said Optic, 31% Prizm. This could have a lot to do with the fact that Optic tends to have better inserts. It tends to have, on-card autographs as opposed to the sticker autos in Prizm. And I know a lot of people just prefer the design and the aesthetic a lot more in Optic. But this actually surprised me. I thought this would be somewhere in the 60-40 range, maybe Optic to Prizm. I generally sense that people like Optic more than Prizm. I asked the same question about Select. Which product do you like better? 54% said Prizm, 46% said Select. And a lot of people said they liked Select better in the earlier years, but that now that Select has kind of been watered down and made with a retail offering, they don't like it as much. Final question was ignoring others' opinions and prices. Which one do you like better, Optic or Select? 71% said Optic over Select. So there's a pretty compelling story here that people generally tend to really like Optic as a product. So then why don't the prices reflect that? Well, one thing I wanted to do was to look at gem rates and to look at total population counts. I focused on PSA data because that is the bulk of it. I'm not favoring PSA as a grading company. There's a lot of data there to analyze, and it's apples to apples from year to year. Went out to gem rate and compiled some data into a spreadsheet, and there's a lot here, so don't get overwhelmed. We'll walk right through this. It's actually pretty straightforward. So in the product Prizm, the total number of cards graded by year. From 2012 to 2014 and then in 2016, you've got like 21 to 25,000 total cards from those sets graded. There was a little bit of a spike in 15 with 35,000. And the gem rate, pretty much all over the place, honestly. 47%, 58%, 52, 44, 53. Those might not sound like big differences, but actually that's pretty significant. From product to product, from year to year, you think there might be some consistency, quality control, how well people were storing the cards on older sets, all of these things come into play. But you're talking about getting a 10, roughly 50% of the time if you're sending these cards in for grading. And then look at what happens here. In 2017, we go from 25,000 in 2016, and in 2017, 109,000 graded. gem rate of 46%. 2018, 331,000 graded at a 49% gem rate. That's Luka's rookie year, Trey, Shea, Jaren Jackson, DeAndre Ayton, Colin Sexton, so many players. Michael Porter Jr., tons of great players from this draft class. Jalen Brunson, people love to get mad at me when I don't mention Jalen Brunson, although he doesn't have as much graded yet. 2019 is when it really went nuclear. This was Zion Mania. This is when Panini made the printing press go burr. Everything came out, boxes upon boxes. That was really the last time that I saw Prizm retail on the shelves back then regularly. Since then, it's been kind of hit or miss, hard to find. And 53% gem rate in 2019. And then this is really interesting. There's the phenomenon where PSA closed their doors, right? They shut down. They had only the highest service level offering for their cards. 69,000 graded from 2020. So from basically a tenth, from 640,000 in Zion's year to 69,000 in LaMelo and Anthony Edwards' year, and then down to 43,000 in 2021. You've got Jalen Green, Cade Cunningham, Scotty Barnes, Evan Mobley, and several others, obviously. So we see this drop off. What does that mean? Does that mean that the print runs are actually lower? I don't think so. I would expect that at least they held consistent from 2019 to 2020 to 21, if not increased. We've seen that with a lot of other products, a lot of other manufacturers, that they just keep upping the print runs. But I think this had everything to do with PSA closing their doors and that base card mania. The bulk of these cards, probably half of these cards being graded, were bases and silvers, and people realized, wow, I can't actually make money when I send a base card that costs, $5 into PSA, costs me $20 or $30 or $50 or $100 to grade, depending on the time, and then I get it back and it's not worth that. So it totally curbed the enthusiasm to send those cards in and flood the grading companies with those base cards, and I think that's why we see this big drop off. So looking at these gem rates, the lowest year, 2020, 35%. That's definitely the case. A lot of LaMelo's cards, very hard to gem, low gem rates, low PSA 10 pop counts. That was the lowest year by far, 35%. It's kind of sad, isn't it? You're talking about one of the more modern years with people pack pulling cards and sending them for grading, not storing them for years, not knowing that they should get them graded, but pulling them right from a pack, sending them to the manufacturer, and you can only get a 35% gem rate on one of the most premium mid-tier products that Panini offers. Hopefully we can see some improvements to that in the future. Jump over to Optic, much lower pop counts. Optic didn't start until 2016, that's hence the NAs here. 26,000 graded, 59% gem rate, and then you jump up to 90,000. So similar to, honestly, to Prizm, the closest gap I would say to Prizm in 2017, 98,000, 219,000, and then 32 and 18,000. And the gem rate dropping here in these later years down into the 36, 44, 40%. And finally, Select, very, very low pop counts, very low print runs for Select. Only 6,000 graded from 2012 Select with a 25% gem rate. Same thing in 2013, 6,500, 57% gem rate, much better gem rate in 2013. 11,000, 10,000, 16, 21, 42,000, and then most recently in 2021. In spite of all the print runs, in spite of all the product, it hasn't been in probably enough time since that came out much later, and they're way behind in their production. So only 8,000 pop counts so far. I'd expect that number to go up significantly over time. Overall, we see a much better gem rate on Select, much, much better overall. Aside from this first year in 2012, we're talking about, mid to high 50s into the 60% range for the gem rate on Select. So how does this modern data compare to other notable sets? And what I will tell you is I looked at two important rookie draft classes where you would think there'd be a lot of cards graded. 1996, of course, with Kobe, with Allen Iverson, with Steve Nash, with Ray Allen, with so many other great players. And then 2003, we all know who came from that draft class. Very low total graded count, tops, 68,000. That's a flagship product, paper product. There was a lot of it printed, and yet still only 68,000 graded, 18% gem rate from that product, 17 on Chrome, 19 on Finest. We see a trend here with all of these. And then Chrome and Finest in 2003 fared much better at 30% roughly gem rate for those products, but very, very, very low pop counts, especially on the 2003 Finest. which in my opinion, if you look at LeBron's rookie cards from that year, I'd much rather have the 2003 finest rookie card of LeBron than I would the 2003 Topps Chrome, which is the one that's obviously more well-known, more iconic, I guess. But if it comes to preference and aesthetics, as well as rarity overall, give me the finest over the Topps Chrome. Now, really, really noteworthy thing to look at here. Let's just zoom in on one player, and this won't be a surprise. I've talked about this before. Let's zoom in on Zion Williamson, again on gemrate.com. Looking right here, this is his 2019 Prizm base card. Just the base card, 22,500 PSA 10s in existence, 41,500 total graded. So 23,000, 41,000. That's more than a lot of these entire sets have had graded. That's more. There are more PSA 10 Zion Williamsons of his base Prizm rookie card than there are all of 2013 Prizm cards graded, and way more PSA 10s than the PSA 10s from these sets. It's kind of alarming. There was so much hype and everything pumped into this player. This is one of the things that I try to talk about. This relates strongly to last week, the conversation with Luca about project out, use prudence, try to see the future, and think about where do these prices go from here. And not in the immediate flip to flip to flip, hot potato, but for the long run, how many of these cards can hold up over time. And bear in mind, if Luca is one of the guys that ends up being one of the greats of this era, I say G-O-T-E, greats of this era, GOAT, Zion, is he going to be the other one? Is it just going to be Zion and Luca? I don't think so. I'd put Giannis into that conversation for sure. You've got Jokic doing a lot of incredible things. There's only going to be a few guys. I think that's an indisputable fact. Last thing to look at, and I pulled this data from our intelligence reports in Market Movers. I'm going to show you that in a minute, a couple of examples of this. But the ratios, the price ratios from year to year, comparing different sets and their respective base and silver parallels. So this is Prizm base versus Optic base from the same year, same player, same grades. Select base, and then we'll do Prizm silver, Optic hollow, and Select silver, comparing these, okay? These are all in the PSA 10 grades. In most cases, I did the last 14-day averages. In some cases, I extended that to 30 days simply because there weren't enough sales because of the low pop counts. That's why you see 3 to 3.5x here. These are the multipliers. And just looking at this overall, what you'll see is it doesn't really seem to make sense. And this is the problem with trying to do like predictive pricing, right? If we go back to the 90s with the Beckett price guide and kind of say, okay, this is what my card should be worth. They used some parameters, they used some boundaries. They told you what a superstar versus an all-star versus a semi-star would be worth roughly on certain sets. In today's market, where you have just comps, free market, trade shows, negotiations, all kinds of sales platforms with different fees and different shipping rates, these things really don't hold any consistent trends year over year in many cases, and I'll show you what I mean. 2012 Prizm, everybody loves the set. They don't go as crazy for Select. In spite of the much, much, much shorter print runs, why don't people say, well, first year Select, it's so critically important? I think it's a beautiful product. 3 to 3.5x multiplier on the Select base for Prizm cards versus the Select base cards from that year for those players. There wasn't enough data at all really to grade or to compare this because those silvers were so short printed in 2012 in both Select and Prizm. That drops down to 1.5x in 2013, and then you see 1.3, 1.4, up to 1.9, up to 2.1, and the highest is 2.4x in 2020. Again, that's kind of when people say that Select got really watered down, and 1.9x in 2021. So a lot of variation here, right? Switch to Optic starting in 2016, 1.7x multiplier. Very interesting, very, very interesting because why? First year Optic. People for a while were really going crazy for these first year Optic cards, and yet the Prizm base cards hold the highest multiplier in 2016 over Optic. So that means they're priced that much higher than the Optic base cards are. 1.2x, 1.3, so some consistency in here in the 1.2 to 1.5. I'd say roughly 1.4x, and you can see that down here, whereas Select is 1.9. That seems to jive with the Instagram poll, where you're thinking about what do you like more, Optic or Select. People are showing that they prefer the Optic cards over the Select base cards. This also has to do with the fact that in Select, you have Concourse, Premier level, and Courtside. The Courtside cards, which are much more short printed, not factored into this. This is comparing the concourse base cards to the Prizm base cards. And I think people see those concourse as a bit of a dime a dozen. With that being said, the premier level also tend to sell for the same amount, if not less in some cases, than the concourse, simply because I think a lot of people don't like the design as much on the premier level. Now, if we jump over and we look at the hollows and the silvers, we see even more of a premium for Prizm silvers, even more of a premium. We're at 2x on the Prizm silver versus optic hollows and 3.1x on the Prizm silver versus the concourse silvers in select. That's a much higher multiplier, especially in recent years where you're over 5.1 and 5.7x. These are huge numbers. What this tells us is that Prizm is commanding a huge premium over select and optic. And it's interesting, right? 1.4x multiplier on the base, but a 3.1x multiplier on the silver to the hollow for optic. Some of these things just don't quite make sense to me when I look at it. I want to know what you think about this. So let's jump over. How did I get this data? Quickly, this is just to show you, this is one of the more advanced features in Market Movers. This is for unlimited members in Market Movers. And this data, in my opinion, is very valuable. It tells a story. It helps you get a bigger picture of things. So I went into intelligence reports. I went into variation ratios. I select a couple of sets, Prizm and optic. I do base to optic. And then I come down here and I throw in my filter with a PSA 10 grade. And I can see the averages here. I can see that there's a 1.3x multiplier. I can also identify outliers. I can look at a card like this Mikal Bridges and say, he's at a 2.19 multiplier. That tells me that maybe his optic card is undervalued or maybe his Prizm card is overvalued. And I've done videos of that in the past and how I kind of decipher which of those it might be. And then you can scroll down and find the opposite too and see if there's other outliers where look at this. Jaren Jackson's actually in a negative. He's in a 0.7. His Prizm base card is actually selling for less than his optic base card. So again, this tells a story about how a lot of things logically, mathematically, in terms of prices in the market, they don't always make sense. People aren't looking at this data as a whole. They're looking at it on a card-by-card basis, on a comp-to-comp basis, without factoring in a lot of this other information. Same thing here I did for the silvers and the optic hollows, you can see, and you can find that similar data. Now, what's really interesting on this, you got a pop 1707 on this Marvin Bagley III on his PSA 10 Prizm silver, pop 94 on his optic hollow. And you see this across the board. Look at this. 2,200 PSA 10 Prizm silvers for Trae Young, 181 PSA 10 optic hollows. So people like optic better than they like Prizm. The pop counts and the print runs are much lower in optic than they are in Prizm. And you've got less than a tenth, 8% of the number of PSA 10 optic hollows, and it's selling for $194, less, 30% less on the optic hollow. What does this mean long term? This is why I'm asking you. I want your opinions on this. Let's jump over into some specific cards. I've got some examples. Start with Jason Tatum. We'll look at a few different comparisons for him. Jason Tatum here, I pulled up his flagship Prizm Silver PSA 10 rookie card, optic hollow, and his concourse silver. So we were talking about those, and you basically see a more than 2-to-1 multiplier, more than 2-to-1. Almost $1,100 most recently on February 10th for his PSA 10 Prizm Silver, $400, so 40% of the cost, less than 40%, on 2/13 for his optic hollow, and $425, so interesting, his select selling for more than his optic hollow. I guess lower pop count, but again, it doesn't quite jive with the poll results, right? So $400. Which one of these would you rather have? For me, I would really rather have, I'd rather have these two and another $300 to spare than I would the Prizm Silver PSA 10. That's my preference. Aesthetically, I like the optic better. I'm not a big fan of 2017 Prizm's design. It's one of my least favorite Prizm designs. So I'd rather have these two cards. Beautiful cards. Rookie photo shoot here. Action photo here, not the most exciting one, but still a nice design. Then this one here with all this weird black framing and everything going on. What do you think about that? Which of these cards would you rather have? Let's look at another example. More exciting, flashier, more beautiful cards, no doubt. I've got the Mojo BGS 95, Mojo Prizm to 25. That sold for almost $11,000, $10,600 on January 26th. I've got his Courtside Zebra and his Courtside Copper to 49. Definitely beautiful cards, which sold for $6,000 and $5,000 respectively. $6,200, $5,200 respectively in roughly the same time frame. We know that the Courtsides are highly sought after. If you look at Courtside Silver to Prizm Silver, the Courtside Silvers definitely sell for more than the Prizm Silver. But here we have a card that is a BGS 9.5, not a PSA 10, a BGS 9.5 Mojo, selling for $4,000 more than the very short printed Pop 13 in both of these cases, PSA 10s of the Courtside Tatums. Would you rather have the Mojo? Do you think the Mojo is the better card, the more desirable collector card? At the end of the day, somebody's got to want these cards long term. A Tatum collector, a Celtics collector, a GOAT collector, somebody's got to want to have these cards long term for them to hold value, right? Which card, if you're collecting Tatum, would you rather have? I know my answer. If this was a PC player, I would definitely rather have these two cards. And you could almost buy these two cards, both of them, for the price of the Mojo. Last comparison for Tatum. Still looking at the Mojo, anchoring that versus some other cards because I think there's an interesting thing here. You got the BGS 9.5 Mojo at 10.6K. I've got a purple Prizm in a PSA 10 numbered to 75 that sold for $4,000. The blue ice in a BGS 9.5 that sold for $2,900. And then the white sparkle PSA 10. These are stated print run, supposedly of 20. I do see Pop 14 on the PSA 10. $2,800. $2,800 on this card as of February 13th, having sold on the white sparkle PSA 10. Pop 14. And you've got the PSA 10 number to 75. Granted, Pop 18 selling for double, or not quite double, but 50% more. And even the blue ice in a BGS 9.5 selling for roughly the same price. You got the blue ice in a PSA 9 selling for nearly the same price. So this is kind of sandwiched in between. And then you have the pink to 25. Granted, looks like some weird bubble gum from the 90s, bazooka or whatever. It's not a particularly attractive card, and I think that takes away a lot from it, but I have seen those prices still command a high premium on a card that's a pink number to 25, BGS 10 pristine, optic to 25, BGS 10 pristine, 1.6K. BGS 9.5 Prizm Mojo, 10.6K. Same time frames. Does that make sense to you? Does that make sense? Would you have snatched up this card? Would you have felt really good about buying this one? This one, I do agree, is more aesthetically pleasing. With a lot of people don't like the pink, but you tell me which one of these things makes sense. Let's jump over and look at Luka, and I'm on price movements by card. And this is just the data, and what you'll notice is if you go into these different time frames, and what I did was I put in Prizm Optic Select for Luka, Prizm Optic Select in his rookie cards only. You see Prizm, 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 Prizm. Finally, here's an optic card that sold, and I'm sorting by price. Prizm, 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 even the rookie hot signatures, or rookie signatures, sticker auto, PSA 10, Prizm, 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 another one of these. You don't see a lot of optic and select cards selling, and we have them in our database. We have those cards in our database. It's the Prizm cards that move. It's the Prizm cards that have more volume. It's the Prizm cards that have higher print runs, and then they sell for more money. Why do you think that is? Obviously, Prizm has built this legacy of being the product, the flagship product. However, over the last few years, I've heard not a few conversations, many conversations about people saying they think optic long-term is a better bet to hold stronger value, that it could creep up and sneak up behind Prizm long-term and overtake it. It kind of reminds me of the 90s. When Upper Deck was a very premium product, Fleer had a really strong insert game going on, and Topps was like the bottom product for basketball cards. It was collecting basketball cards heavily in the 90s. Topps was the bottom end product. Flash forward 30 years, and you've got Topps as the product of the 90s. Kobe's Topps base card and his Topps Chrome going for crazy money, and everything else is sort of below that. Could the same thing happen long term with optic or select over Prizm? I don't know, but it's certainly possible. Let's look at Ja, and I've got one from each set. His BGS 9.5 black and gold, choice black and gold to 8. People love these cards. The green concourse to 5 in select, and then his PSA 10 purple to 75. So number to 8 black and gold, number to 5 concourse green, and a purple to 75, and we're in the same ballpark roughly for price here. Yes, it's about $1,500 more on the BGS 9.5 black gold to 8, but you're talking about a set that had like 39, 42 parallels, something like that, Prizm in 2019, and the number to 75, which is sandwiched between so many other cards, selling for roughly the same price as the PSA 10 green to 5. Just another example. Last one, the great of this era, the GOAT of this era, Patrick Mahomes. Congratulations, Chiefs fans. I'm thrilled. Winning another Super Bowl, and you've got $18,000 on his purple crystals, $13,000 on his much more short printed white sparkle. And this is the one that gets me here. BGS 9.5 Optic Black to 25, $9,000, selling for half the price of a PSA 10 to 75 purple crystals. Give me this card, give me 2 of them every time over this card. In fact, give me this black optic and this tie-dye field level to 25 for $16,500 before I'd pay $18,000 for this purple crystals. Another example of the money going into Prizm, but the opinion and the collector sentiment for sure in favor of Optic and even to some extent Select. So, what do you think? Is Prizm really a premier product? Is it the premier product? If so, why? It's very watered down, it's overprinted. I like Prizm. I'm not bashing on Prizm. But if I'm looking long term at which ones seem like they have the more mystique and the collector favor behind them, it seems like it's Optic. The people seem to prefer that, yet the dollars speak for the Prizm. This reminds me about the polls that I've done for grading, where many people say that they prefer BGS or SGC over PSA. Same thing, the prices don't reflect that. So do you think things will ever change? Let me know down in the comments. If you want to get this data, visit marketmoversapp.com and use promo code DIVE to get the first 7 days free. Thanks so much for watching. Until next time, happy investing, keep on collecting, and make sure to have fun.